Hello and welcome back to Game Brigade. I'm your host Brian, and on this show we do reviews, previews, and playthroughs of your favorite games. So if you're new here, please consider subscribing. And as always, we are doing none of those three things I keep saying we're doing. I'm telling you guys, we might need to get a new intro, but for now, the intro works well for us. Today, we're going to be talking about my collection and how I manage or upkeep my collection in terms of games coming in and out, or how do I know when to back a game or not back a game. Again, this is going to be part of our Game Brigade Talks segment. I'm not totally sure I'm set on the name Game Brigade Talks. Now that I've named it that, though, now that I've said it, it's probably going to keep. I don't know. I'd love to get your guys' opinions on what you think about the name Game Brigade Talks. Let me know in the comment section, or if you're in the Discord, we'll chat about it there. Before we get to the actual subject, I've got USS Freedom sitting here. And what is this doing here, you may ask? Well, I'm going to be giving away a copy of USS Freedom from their latest Kickstarter. We'll have more details at the end of the episode, but I just want to make sure I let you guys know up here in the front. So without further ado, let's get going. Okay, so I want to talk about my collection. How do I maintain my collection? How do I keep my collection thin or manageable? I think it's a complicated subject, and it might not be able to be fully discussed in a single video. But I can at least talk about my methodology, the things that I do that at least help me make decisions when acquiring a new game or thinking about a new game. But one of the core principles that I need to make sure people understand is I view, and I'm going to be looking over here a lot because my main wall is over here, which you guys can't see. If you want to see other videos, you can see it. But my main wall is over here, and I view really any collection, anyways, not just my board game collection, but any collection, is a living, breathing entity. It's always evolving, it's always changing, and things or views might change on a daily basis, depending on my interpretation of, what do I need at this moment. So with that, knowing that things can change, I think that'll be a good starting point. So first off, I have categories, and these are usually loosely based categories, and within these categories I have more refinement. But high level speaking here, I have 4 categories that I usually use when deciding if a game would fit into my category. The first one that I want to talk about, and we're going to bring some games over here to kind of talk about it. Let's bring this one over first. Are core games. Core games I view as a game that is essential for my collection. Something that makes me happy, and that I enjoy seeing on my wall, regardless to the amount of times it may get to the table. So this might mean a game that I necessarily haven't played in a while, but I still love owning, and I wouldn't want to get rid of it, because by getting rid of it, it will signify it'll be an empty spot in my collection or my heart, if that makes sense. Twilight Imperium, I felt, was a great example of this, because while I haven't played a game of Twilight Imperium since 2019, when I did play this game, we played the heck out of it. In a 6 or 9 month stretch, we played maybe 20 or 30 games. We were playing usually 4 to 5 times a month. We jammed it a lot, and I never got tired of it. And whenever we were able to get a group together that was willing to play, I was 100% down. Unfortunately, with 2020, it's not been as easy to get a game like this to the table, because it requires, I only play this game at 5 or 6 players. There's a new expansion coming out that'll allow up to 8, I believe. But obviously 2020, that makes it more difficult. But it's also hard, to get 5 or 6 adults to the table. When you have lives, you've got families. It's all in this game. Minimum usually is about an 8 to 10 hour time commitment. So when you're calling your buddies and saying, "Hey guys, you got your Saturday free Okay, yeah, what are we doing Saturday? I'm asking for your whole Saturday free. I need the whole day for this one. And that's what Twilight Imperium is. So this has almost been regulated to like a birthday game where you're like, hey, it's my birthday and I want to play Twilight Imperium. So now you're stuck playing with me. But I still love it. It's one of my top games. I love it in my collection. I like looking at it on the wall. It's just part of the collection. So, but I want to talk about other games that are core games. So like right now, Wingspan, I would consider in my collection is a core game in my collection. I will never turn down someone asking to play Wingspan. It's an enjoyable game. New expansion just came out. While I do see myself having played probably the lifetime amount of Wingspan that I could possibly play, combined especially with the new the Steam version, I still really enjoy it. So as of right now, it's a core game, but I could see this eventually shifting out to a primary game later. So got to make some more room here. I can just keep these here, whatever. With that, I then get to the second tier. The second tier of games are primary games. And primary games are generally games that are usually highly rated on Board Game Geek. They have a broad spectrum of gamers that enjoy these types of games. So they're going to be more highly rated. Not just highly rated, but more easier to be played in a broad spectrum of players in my group. I've got different types of players in my player group. Some like wargaming, some like dungeon games, some like deck builders. So to have a game that can kind of appease everyone, I consider those my primary games. And they're ones that when people come over, if we have a mixed groups of people, they're almost always going to be the easiest ones to get to the table. So for example, I've got Everdell. You can't see it from this. This is the collector's edition cover. Boop, boop, boop. Throw that over there for now. We've got... It's backwards. We've got Everdell. Everdell's a beautiful game. Great mechanics. Just overall a very enjoyable game that I have found many people enjoy playing. So that would be an example of a primary game. But another example... Oh my gosh, I got some games that are way too far out of my reach. Terraforming Mars. So these are games that I have found to be immensely popular. I've never had someone in the group say, I'm not really feeling that. They're almost always going to be highly rated games. So when I'm looking at backing a game, if it falls within this category, I then have to say, okay, what overlap do I have that either is there a theme overlap or is there a gameplay overlap or is there a scoring overlap, something that might overlap with a current primary game that I have in my collection. If I don't see anything or if there's enough differences in the overlap, I might say, okay, that's okay, I can add it to my collection. For example, a recent Kickstarter that just went live that should be completed very soon, actually just completed, was Atlantis Rising. I see that as a new potential primary game in my collection for a cooperative experience. It's got an interesting theme, it's got a good gameplay mechanics, and it doesn't really overlap with too many other games that I have in my primary collection that I could easily see that adding into my collection. So that's a good example of identifying what I have in my category and seeing what fits. So this is my primary category. The next category of games would be secondary games. Secondary games generally, Secondary games generally have interesting gameplay mechanics, have different types of rules. It might not fit into what most people would enjoy as their game. They're not bad games. A lot of these games can be some of my most enjoyable games, but they're just more niche-y games. So for example, I pulled out Chronicles of Crime. Great game, has a unique type of play experience by using a phone app and QR codes. But I don't think I could pull this out with every play group and be a hit. It'd probably be a hit with a lot of people, but not with everyone. So that's why I see Chronicles of Crime as more of a secondary game. Another example of that would be Here we go. Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective is one of my top games. I love this game. I love the mechanics, the way the game plays and feels. But if I were to bring this to a game night with people that are, mixed gamers and said, hey, let's try this board game, a lot of people would look at this and say, that's not a board game. I don't even know what that is. So that's why this fits in my secondary category. I think you have a lot more room in the secondary category to have a wide variety of collection there. I just caution you in terms of the amount of gameplay that you're going to get out of your secondary games. I've got one more as an example. I really should have prepped that a little better. These games are so big. Another example of a secondary game that, while it's super fun, I don't think fits a lot of people. And that would be Seventh Continent. Seventh Continent rubs some people the wrong way. So depending on the player group you have, this is one that just wouldn't normally work. So I hope that kind of breaks down my explanation of a secondary game in terms of what do I see enjoyable. The last category is one that I think every collection needs, but I don't necessarily enjoy having, not that I don't enjoy having them, but more that like I don't reach for these games as often. And those are your gateway games. Gateway games, such as my Tokaido here, are a great way to bring new people to the table that you might not normally get to the table. They're great learning experiences for players, and I generally see them as less intimidating experiences for people that are new to the hobby. A lot of times, and I'll show you a good example of this actually, is Twilight Imperium. A lot of the wives or partners of some of my player group people, whenever we talk about games and we talk about how fun and epic they are, sometimes we're talking about a game like Twilight Imperium. So they start interpreting all of our game nights to be like 8-hour romps. So when I try to introduce games to people, I want to pick a title that is less intimidating, easier to grasp and handle. And I feel like these gateway games like Tokaido is a great experience for that. Another new one I just picked up for this exact reason was also Parks. I think these are great games to bring people into the hobby, show them that there's more to gaming than just the old classics that they may know, Life, Monopoly, Sorry, things like that. There's more to gaming. And I think by having some form of gateway games that cover different types of themes is important to have. With that, I break it down. Like I said, I have more categories that I use between that, like educational games. Like there's games that I've backed that are purely educational purposes for my daughter. Like when I see a game like that, I might not play this game very often, but I would like to have it in my collection. I feel like it fits a specific niche. So knowing all of this, I will analyze my collection regularly and say, okay, this game that I'm looking at in the retail shelf, or I'm looking at a Kickstarter, how does this game fall within my collection, and where can I see it fitting, and how will that make it evolve? And with that, there's sometimes games that will come up and they'll have an exact same mechanic or same feel as a game currently in my collection, and it might change it so that that game now gets shifted to my potential culling list. And I generally, and I'm actually doing it right now, which is kind of nice to have all these games down, I generally take my wall and I reorganize my board game wall, sometimes once a month, sometimes twice a month, shifting games around, seeing if there's games that I haven't played in a while, if I move it to a different area of the board game wall, if that will incentivize my brain to want to pull that game out next time we have a play group going together. Different things or different ways that I can stimulate my senses in terms of how can I bring this game to the forefront. If there's a game that I'm consistently looking at and saying, I don't want that game, I'll then shift it to the culling section. And I generally will then remove games in waves. If I've got one game that's on the outskirts of ready getting going, I'm not going to sell it right away. I generally wait till I got 3 or 4 games that I can list at one time, and then just shuffle those games out as soon as I can. Depending on also the amount of games that I've got coming in from Kickstarter, might incentivize myself to clear room, because you have a limited space and you don't have all the room in the world to keep them on your walls and keep things there forever. So as I said, this is a consistently living, breathing thing. Things will shift in and out, and I have an example of that. Gloomhaven. Gloomhaven for a long time was a game that I considered a core game for me. It was a game that I loved. But as I played it more and played it more, I realized it wasn't a game that felt like this needed to be in my collection. I felt like I had reached a point where I'd gotten everything I wanted out of Gloomhaven, especially out of the group that we were playing with. And it said, okay, now this is going to fall down to a secondary tier for me, because not as many people will play this with me. And I could see myself, if there are other dungeon crawlers that come into my collection, I could see myself eventually culling Gloomhaven. Not like it's a bad game. I think Gloomhaven's an amazing game. It's got amazing mechanics, but we've got Frosthaven on the shelf coming soon. So do I need both Gloomhaven and Frosthaven? They play the same capacity. So these are things that I could take a game that could go from the top and all the way down to the bottom. And sometimes, this will be a little tidbit before we wrap up here, there are games that I have in my core collection that I haven't even played. For example, I've got World of Warcraft, the board game, sitting up there at the top, that I consider one of my core games. I love looking at it. When I come and look at my collection, my eye almost always draws to my World of Warcraft board game. I have never played that game. It's just one that I love having. So even though the core games are games that I see as a core part of my collection, doesn't necessarily mean they have to be games I play all the time. I wanted to show that with some of my examples here. So that is the rundown for how I manage my collection, or how I view my collection. Again, I think there's a lot more conversation space to be had here. I definitely think there's more conversation that we could do. So I'd love to know, first off, we'll do hashtag collection in the comments. I would love to know, what are ways that you guys are currently managing your collection, or do you feel like you're not managing it at all? Let me know in the comment section down below. Okay, before we wrap up, let's pull this bad boy back up. Freedom. So we're going to be giving away a copy of USS Freedom from the Kickstarter. So there are a few rules we have to have. Just like last time, you need to be subscribed to this channel, and you're going to leave a comment on this video of hashtag USS Freedom. That way I can go back and track it. This giveaway will be completed with about 48 hours left in their campaign. The caveat to this, the winner, to be able to be eligible for this giveaway, will have to back $1 into their campaign to be eligible to get into the Pledge Manager. And then in the Pledge Manager, the creator will credit you the base pledge level. So make sure you're aware of that you will have to pledge $1 or the equivalent euro to be eligible to back this. So if that's something that you don't feel like you can do, or is that something you don't feel comfortable with, I understand. But unfortunately, to be able to get into this Pledge Manager, they're asking you to pledge $1. So again, if you are interested in that, if you're like, hey, you know what, I'm still interested in USS Freedom and I want to get into that, leave a comment down below, hashtag USS Freedom. When we're getting closer to 40 hours left on this campaign, I will run the giveaway and reach out to the winner. Again, you must be subscribed to this channel and comment down below. So that's about it. I hope everyone enjoyed this video. Again, I always enjoy these conversation talks. I think they're an easy way to have a conversation with the channel and kind of build the discourse a little bit. So leave your comments down below. I'd like to hear them and see what you guys have to say, and I will talk to you all very soon.